Hi, everyone. It's great to have you here today. For those of you who are familiar with the practice or have watched my introduction video, you'll know that I partner with clients to transform self-abandonment into self-abundance, to create tangible and sustainable change in people's lives. I thought it might be useful to clarify what we mean by self-abandonment and self-abundance before jumping into our main topic today, because as we walk through the topic of loneliness, we'll be looking specifically at how these two terms relate to loneliness. So, for simplicity's sake, I've divided life into 6 different areas. So I'm going to share the chart on my screen so that you can follow along. Good morning, Melanie. As I'm sharing this, I will this would be the first time that I have shared anything, and it was here prior, and now it's not. So, because I don't know where that is, I prepared a backup because you never know how life's going to go. So I'm going to show you the chart here. So we'll talk about life divided into the 6 different areas here. So essentially, I'll talk you through what each area of your life might look like if you are abandoning or abundancing. So note that these are common themes that I see in coaching, and they will play out slightly differently in each person's life because we are really unique individuals. If you look at the blue slice of pie, when you mentally abandon yourself, you hang out with your inner critic. You don't have heavy self-judgment. You don't accept things about yourself. And statements like, I am not a person who, abound. Some common vocabulary you use is should, have to, I can't, it is what it is. When you are practicing mental self-abundance, you suspend judgment. You recognize that you are trying your best, and you practice inner compassion. You accept who you are as is. And when things don't go well, you recognize that you had a bad experience, not that you are a bad person. You are lonely. You're not a loser. You are disappointed. You are not a disappointment. So moving to the orange section of this wheel, wrong side. When you self-abandon, you do not permit feelings as they are not useful. You ignore them or you invalidate them. I can't feel X because somebody else has it worse. You don't express how you feel, and that often makes it difficult to regulate emotions. So you end up exploding rather than handling the anger as it arises. And those explosions can really create rifts in personal and professional relationships. When you're in a space of emotional abundance, you allow yourself to feel sad, angry, uncomfortable, and you learn from it. You can recognize and accept your emotions and understand why the feeling comes up. You can label the feeling with precise language, and you can express it in a way that honors yourself and others. And you get curious about your feelings. You ask what that emotion says about you and the rules you live by, rather than applying it to how other people should change. Now, jumping down to the purple pie on the bottom, when you abandon yourself in the social arena, you're not able to say no when you need to. You don't speak up, you silence your voice, and you spend a lot of energy contorting yourself into whatever you need to be to fit in. You wear a mask and you hide the real you. You avoid social situations that would offer intimate connection. And when anyone asks how you are, the answer is fine, whether that's true or not. But when you practice social self-abundance, you're able to set and hold boundaries that honor your needs. You're able to show up authentically in all situations so that your family, your friends, and your colleagues see one you, not 3 different versions of you. You're able to express yourself, whether that's sharing an opinion when you would have withheld it, or outright disagreeing with someone gently but directly. Moving to the yellow area, physical self-abandonment looks like binging, boozing, not exercising, and not maintaining a work-life balance. It's making no time for play, and it's numbing. TV, shopping, opioids, whatever it is that numbs. But when you are showing up for yourself in the physical area of life, you are practicing sobriety around whatever it is that you use to numb feelings. You get regular exercise, you prioritize sleep, you make healthy eating decisions. And for most people, it means that there's a regularity to their schedules. Moving to the red area, when you spiritually abandon yourself, you don't connect to that stillness inside you. You don't connect to a higher realm, a purpose, or an energy, however that shows up for you. And you don't take time to detach and just be quiet. But when you are spiritually in tune, you are able to make time to connect with the stillness inside. You connect to your inner child, and you leave space for things that you're passionate about. You take time to detach, and you're quiet, whether that's meditating, reflecting, or praying. And for the final slice of pie, the green one, self-abandonment in your environment might look like not creating beauty, not noticing beauty in your life, or passively avoiding things in your environment that create stress or don't serve you. Maybe it's continuing to create situations that don't serve you, like continually adding too much to your to-do list so you never succeed. Maybe it's avoiding asking for help by offering help when you already feel overwhelmed. Abundance in your environment, however, might look like taking time to create beauty in your room, your house, your office, or your life. It means saying no to situations that don't serve you. Those habitual situations that pop up where you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to save money, but you're continually going out to lunch and dinner with friends. You're able to say no to those. Now, one thing to note is that these are all fluid. Often we fluctuate between abandonment and abundance in different areas of our lives at different times, even different times of day. And often our ability to show up for ourselves is influenced by factors like sleep, diet, stress, among others. The cool thing is that you can learn to practice self-abundance. And like going to the gym, you get better at it. You get stronger at it with daily practice. So now let's talk about how self-abandonment and self-abundance relate to loneliness. And then I'll give you a quick overview of what we'll do with the rest of our time today. So research by Brené Brown and Stephen Hayes, who pioneered ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, along with others, has shown that all of us have an absolutely universal need to belong, to connect. So while social and cultural changes in the last 50 years have made it more difficult to satisfy this need, the good news is that we can change how we show up in order to create a sense of connection, which really answers our deepest yearning, and it's the antidote to loneliness. Now, that connection starts with you, because you can't experience a sense of true connection and true belonging until you do two things. So one, you have to belong to yourself. You must accept yourself as you are and honor yourself. And you have to be willing to expose your true self as you are in order to create that meaningful connection. Now, because most of us have learned over our lifetimes to habitually self-abandon, we don't show up authentically. We don't connect to and we don't honor ourselves. We mask. We don't admit. We don't accept or validate our feelings. We don't reach out. We numb and we ignore that lonely child inside of us. Thus, on a daily basis, we create rifts within ourselves that turn into black holes of longing and need that we really try to stuff with television or gossip or social media comparison or alcohol. My point here is that while there are social and cultural changes that induce loneliness, and while these are larger than our individual stories, what we do to and for ourselves matters. We can influence loneliness both in our individual lives and in the collective. So let me tell you a little bit about loneliness. We'll take a look at some of the basic data, and we'll talk about how loneliness affects our health and our communities. After that, we'll jump into what we can do about it, how we can shift our own loneliness to improve our outcomes, as well as creating stronger communities. And we'll also talk about what that looks like if you're practicing self-abundance. So, you want to talk, but you don't have anyone to call. You are absolutely not alone. Published by The Economist and the Kaiser Family Foundation show that fully 54% of Americans have said that they always or sometimes feel that no one really knows them. And loneliness isn't just a US phenomenon. In a nationwide survey released in October from the BBC, 1/3 of people in the UK said that they often feel very lonely. And nearly half of the people in the UK over 65 consider television or their pet as their main source of company. And in Japan, there are more than 500,000 people who have not left their house or interacted with anyone for at least 6 months. In Canada, the share of households is now 28%, and across the EU, it's 34%. So I will share the links to these reports and other studies where I drew my information on my Facebook business page after this event. But in sum, there's a wealth of data to show that globally people are absolutely lonely. Now, how does loneliness affect our physical health? Well, loneliness is a warning sign, so you should pay attention. Like hunger or thirst, loneliness is the body's signal that your social self is in pain. According to John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago, loneliness is the body's early warning sign that you are in danger. In a simplified explanation, when you experience feelings of loneliness, that emotion signals to your brain to release cortisol, a stress hormone designed to induce a fight or flight response. It's a hyper-awareness of danger and vulnerability against social isolation. We are inherently social animals, and we search for connection as a survival mechanism. And if that means of survival is threatened, our body response warns us so we can change course to ensure that we thrive. Now, Cacioppo says that although it's an absolutely miserable feeling, we would never want to shut off the trigger of loneliness because it would be like completely shutting down hunger. You'd lack the signal to eat. But many of us still do try to shut down that signal. And ignored loneliness is toxic, mentally and physically. Scientists have long known that loneliness is emotionally painful and causes depression, anxiety, even schizophrenia. Research in the US points to loneliness as the main factor behind almost 40% of the reported cases of depression. But only recently have they recognized how destructive it is to the body. Loneliness kills. It poses a greater threat to health than obesity, and its life-shortening effects are comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So one 2015 analysis pooled data from 70 different studies. They followed more than 4 million people, and they found that lonely individuals had a 26% higher risk of dying. That increased to 32% if they lived alone. Now, John Cacioppo's research also shows that obesity increases odds of early death by 20%, alcoholism by 30%, but loneliness increases it by 45%. So studies by the National Institutes of Health show that loneliness, left untended, has serious consequences for cognition, emotion, behavior, and health. Because of how our body responds to the threat of loneliness and the social stigma that accompanies loneliness, which I'll touch on in just a moment, an incredible number of us are battling with impaired immune response, less restful sleep, cognitive decline because of our loneliness. So let's first look at how loneliness becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. When we feel lonely, your brain goes into self-preservation mode, similar to the fight or flight response from early evolution. Essentially, the lonelier you are, the harder it is to step into someone else's shoes and be empathetic, because neurologically, you have less brain activity in the area that controls empathy. And because the focus is on self-preservation, even though loneliness might send you the signal that you want to connect with others, it's hard to do so because unconsciously you are looking for threats. And this response actually creates a neurological block to the antidote to loneliness, which is connection, because your body is assessing and assigning threat levels to social interactions. Now, identifying interactions as negative and focusing on them reduces the likelihood that you are going to be able to connect with someone the way that your body is craving. So even if you are able to identify the social opportunities and the valuable relationships, our chronic loneliness often hampers our ability to capitalize on those opportunities to connect. And that inability to connect threatens our deepest yearnings to belong. How many of us dread going to a social event and cannot bear the thought of having to hold that mask in place for 1 second longer? This leads us in ideal times to avoid connecting and connecting meaningfully. So we really are never replenished. And that inability to connect means that loneliness gets worse, which really creates a propagative cycle. Now, the other factor that helps create that repetitive cycle of loneliness is stigma. Loneliness doesn't equate to being alone. You can be surrounded by friends, colleagues, and family. You can have thousands of social media connections, but unless those interactions are in real time and they're uplifting specifically, they won't feed your soul in a meaningful way. And loneliness can be hard to identify and treat because it hides. It's invisible because we're absolutely ashamed of being lonely. For most people, being lonely is akin to being a loser. And this stigma, both self and socially imposed, makes it difficult to accept and admit it. So if you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't hear it, and you can't taste it, you can't touch it, then you can't treat it. Now, we've covered what a baseline of loneliness does to us mentally and physically. Let's take a look at what it means for our communities. So neurologically, when we are chronically lonely, we are less empathetic, less able to step in the shoes of another, which is dangerous not only for our own health, but for the health of our community. Loneliness makes us selfish because we are in a survival state, looking at a landscape of scarcity. Lonely people feel and act less approachable, undermining trust, group cohesion, and collaboration with others. And it's from this mindset that we are able to ignore or dismiss what would actually heal our loneliness, the opportunity to connect. So when we proactively step away from others, we don't see their pain and their suffering, which at the very heart of being is identical to ours. And it's in this state that we aren't able to reach out. We aren't able to bridge divides and heal through connection. Our communities become fragmented and divided. And under stress, so in a time of uncertainty, for example, like now, it's exacerbated. And so the rifts are even greater. But so what can we do about it? Well, we can start showing up for ourselves. We can start choosing today to move from self-abandonment to self-abundance, a culture of belonging and connection with us. Now, I'd like to be clear. Loneliness, that terrible feeling of being unseen, unwanted, misunderstood, alone in a crowd, it's not likely to disappear forever. We will never have complete control over external influences, but we can be a choice in how we respond to those feelings. We can learn to proactively identify, understand, label, and express our loneliness. In short, we can respond rather than react to those feelings. Now that part is a long process to which I will challenge you to take action at the end of this call. But for now, there are 4 basic things you can start doing immediately. Now these 4 things are small, meaning manageable, but they will create noticeable differences if you practice them regularly. They require, however, that you commit to showing up for yourself. So the first way is to connect, and there are 2 parts to this. The human experience is a collective one. So firstly, you look for the similarities, not the differences, at the heart, the basis of each individual's experience. And you'll find that we are searching for the same things: belonging, coherence, feeling, meaningful direction, orientation, and competence. Use that understanding to reach out and connect, and do it early when the first warning signal sounds, before it becomes daunting. And make this a regular practice. There's a practice of Tonglen. It's a mindfulness technique from Pema Chodron that can help with this. I won't go into it here, but it's worth looking up. I'll include a link with the rest of the research when I share it after this live event. So the second part to connection is to, secondly, make sure that the connections are meaningful. Pay attention to quality over quantity. Select connections that are uplifting, ones that leave you feeling replete rather than drained. Now, in terms of self-abundance, connecting means that you will show up authentically, letting people really see you. Now, to give you some concrete examples, you're going to meet your friends instead of canceling because your perfect outfit doesn't fit. You're going to admit that you don't know the answer on your business call, or that you are blanking in the moment rather than faking an emergency to end that call. You are going to meet 2 friends and tell them how you really are, instead of meeting 50 people and flitting from group to group, keeping the interaction superficial. You are going to reach out rather than avoid when you feel hopelessly alone, and you are going to take the risk and use words, lonely, depressed, or disappointed, to ask for what you need in that moment. You're going to think through how you want to connect and invite someone to join you in whatever way that manifests for you. In your realness, you offer true connection and you leave space for others to come forth because you are a stigma-less friend. So the second thing that you can practice when you feel lonely is service. You can treat connection as an action, not as a feeling. When you feel lonely, you crave, and you're often absolutely desperate for connection. And this often makes us think that we're searching for a feeling of fullness that fills the empty void inside. But when we think of our loneliness as a feeling of hunger, a need for satiety, we often overcompensate. We grab onto another starving person until together the loneliness eats us. So instead of this, what if we treated connection as a medicinal action? One where you look to connect through service. Being seen and having your needs met creates true connections. When you connect to someone else's wishes or unmet needs, you create that true sense of connection. You feed their soul, and that opens them to connect with you. And besides creating an opening for that connection, this helps you practice empathy, stepping into someone else's shoes. And service can also be really rewarding. And a full soul is a connected soul. Now, in terms of self-abundance, service means proactively creating opportunities, actively looking for what you can do for others. And this will look different for each of us. So whether it's baking bread for neighbors or calling elderly people, whether it's volunteering at your child's school or serving at a homeless shelter, whether it's creating a group around a favorite activity like a book club or a climbing group or a cooking club, or whether it's visiting people in the hospital, Create something that works for you that is based on meaningful connection. So the other part of the success equation here is that when you serve, you are able to show up authentically. That's key. So using the examples from before, let's say in your book club that you read a book that affected you powerfully, or when you visited people in the hospital that scared you, or when you went to your business networking event, your not good enough, not capable gremlin came up. The key here is that you share, that you own it. Often it's our own vulnerability that opens the door for others to share their authentic selves. So show up, but show up in your truth. Leave the mask at home. So the third way that we can connect, work on loneliness, is through touch. Skin hunger, also known as touch deprivation, is an actual condition. There are specific nerve cells that reside in our skin and transmit emotional responses to the brain. When they are hungry, we feel lonely. Now, while it's not advisable to touch strangers, clearly during this pandemic, we can turn to those who are close to us, who are in our quarantine groups, and seek out and offer hugs and caresses. Those light touches will send signals to our brain that we are receiving connection, the antidote. Now, in terms of self-abundance, this means that you recognize your need for affection and attention. In terms of self-care, you actively seek touch from others, and you also find ways to soothe yourself and offer comfort to yourself. If you have access to people that are part of your quarantine, self-abundance means asking them for what you need. It means scheduling time to be close with these people and look for ways to increase the contact. So sitting together on the couch reading instead of in separate chairs. Perhaps it means trying something new, giving your child a massage, asking your mother to brush your hair, giving your roommate a back rub. So the fourth and final way that we can connect is gratitude. So both of the first 2 points, connection and service, are based on or alter perspective, enhancing our empathy and concern for others. And gratitude functions kind of similarly. So Martin Seligman, founder of positive psychology out of the University of Pennsylvania, has shown that practicing gratitude significantly impacts depression, both when you are clinically depressed and also preventatively. So a statistically significant number of people have better outcomes if they practice gratitude. Now, they've piloted this as a program in the US military and in international schools, and they've had amazing results. 50 years ago, wellness was primarily measured as the absence of mental or physical illness, but research has shown that it is really very much based on the presence of positive factors, as well as preventative practice. Now, positive characteristics like hope, optimism, gratitude, love of learning can be learned, and they can be put into practice on a regular basis to prevent anxiety and depression that often accompany loneliness. So, in terms of self-abundance, practicing gratitude means that at the end of each day, you focus your attention on what you're thankful for. What went well in your day and why? You take the time to look for the positive things in life. You turn your focus to learning new things and sharing what you learned. That's key. You choose to look for the bright spots in the day rather than the challenges or the things that went wrong. Daily practice makes this a game changer because your attention follows focus, and focus often predicts and determines your overall well-being. Now, before I close, I want to take a moment just to say thank you for having the courage to jump into a subject that is difficult for most people to admit to themselves, much less explore. I hope that the 4 practical things that you can do speak to you. So much of our wellness, our connection, is based in the small, ordinary, daily practice and tasks. Don't underestimate the power of minute action. Stick with it. Now for the call to action. So I challenge you to put at least one of the 4 ways that I shared into practice for a week, and then share how well it worked, or generally just your experience with it, in the comments section on this page. I look forward to hearing your stories of connection and hugs, service and gratitude. And lastly, if you found anything useful in this talk, I ask that you share it with someone that you think could benefit. And additionally, if there was anything that sparked an interest, something you would like to work on further, I have lots of tools and can create a tailored plan to help you develop your toolkit for self-abundance. Please visit my website at www.meganwarrencoaching.com and let's schedule a free chat. Thank you again for attending. Be well.